born and raised in Singapore, and I moved here to the Abbey 14 years ago. I thought to just say that because there are some fairly new people whose names I don't even know yet since we've been in silence most of the morning. I've only met the people sitting at my lunch table, so that will have to be remedied at some point. Anyhow, I feel very, very privileged to be able to offer this final session of this Practicing Buddhism retreat. And as always, we'll begin with some recitations to set our mind in a virtuous direction. We'll sit quietly for a few minutes after that to bring our body and mind into the space, and then I'll set a motivation, and we'll see where we wind up. So let's take a moment to refresh the visualization of the Buddha in the space in front of us. I think you've heard it guided in different ways a number of times now, so you might take a moment to lead yourself in that in a way that resonates for you. And let's connect from our heart with all Mother sentient beings in human form surrounding us. And we lead them in going for refuge. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha. 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 So, to the best of my knowledge, in the last 24 hours, no one was so overwhelmed by anger that they yelled at someone else, or reached out to hit someone, or got so upset they just got in their car and drove off. And also, I don't think I've heard from the office that anyone was so overwhelmed by attachment that they broke into the office and got their cell phone back so they could check messages, or stole into the kitchen and grabbed a tub of ice cream and scarfed it in their room, or whatever it is we do when we're overwhelmed by attachment. And of course, these are funny examples, but we can think of how at this very moment, there are people who are so overwhelmed by anger and attachment, engaging in all kinds of harmful behaviors. There are people actively fighting conflicts right now. There are people killing and being killed. There are people so overwhelmed by their pain and misery that they're turning to drugs, alcohol, completely numbing out, with no idea that there is an alternative, that there might be a different way to work with their anger and attachment that's creating so much pain and misery. So how incredible it is that here we are this weekend with a group of people who have very, very different aspirations, worldviews, seeking to become better people. And all of us share this common aim of wanting to do so by looking inward, not by trying to control or change the external environment. Perhaps we've already tried to do that and that hasn't gotten us very far. And instead we're looking inside and investigating very deeply, what are the causes for happiness? What are the causes for suffering? And how does working with the mind help me to create the true causes of happiness and overcome suffering? So again, rejoicing in these marvelous conditions that we have to continue our exploration of this topic, to continue cultivating good qualities that will help us to become kinder, wiser, more compassionate beings. Let's set this motivation to use our time together, what's left of it, this morning, later this afternoon, to do our practice for the benefit of all beings. That we're overcoming suffering, creating the causes for happiness, not just for ourselves to feel some temporary peace and joy, but knowing that we are so deeply interconnected that we have the ability to influence all the beings that we come into connection with. And by creating peace in our own minds, may we be able to contribute to peace in our families, in our communities, in broader society, in this universe. So I guess this topic of world peace is on my mind because that's what Venerable Chuni brought up at the prayers before breakfast this morning, for those of us who were here. She was mentioning that the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, which is an organization started by two of Venerable Chödrön's teachers, or Abba's Venerable Chödrön, her teachers, they've been saying that we should make prayers for there to be world peace, and this is an urgent matter. And so what that brought to mind actually was a memory of when I was in my early 20s. I was freshly out of college and I was volunteering with this group in Singapore that helped migrant worker women. Many of them work as domestic workers in Singapore for very low pay, and they have to live in the house, same house as the person who hires them, so no privacy really, and you're kind of on call all the time. And there was no mandatory rest day. And so I was I was volunteering at a shelter for women who had run away from very difficult employment situations. And I was very upset by what I was witnessing and hearing about. And at that time, I was also studying the Dharma. I was a baby Buddhist. So I remember going to class and asking the teacher, I think something related to like, how does my practice relate to what I'm seeing in this, all this suffering, what can I actually do? And he responded, it's very nice that you want to create peace in the world. Yeah, so he kind of said that about the motivation. But he said, can you even create peace in your own heart? I was like, And he said, can you even create peace in your own home? Can you create peace in like the 10-mile radius in Singapore, 10-kilometer radius of where you're living? And that really kind of threw me for a loop because at that time, while I was actively volunteering and, feeling very like righteous about what I was doing, I could not get out of the house without arguing with my mother every day. There was no peace in the house. I had come back from studying overseas with my independent lifestyle. Now I had to live with her again, and every day, she would say something about what I was wearing, and I just had to say something back. Like, who cares? I'm gonna wear what I want. Yes, my clothes smell of cigarettes. Who cares? I'll wash it myself. It's like, when I think back, that really was not necessary, but that's how it is when you're in your 20s trying to, I'm an adult now, I'll do what I want. You have no right to control my life. So it made for a very unpleasant home situation, to say the least. And I would just get out of the house and, help those abused women and fight with my mother and not see any conflict in that. So this teaching, really woke me up, and got me thinking like, what does it mean to bring about peace in this world when I don't have peace in my heart and when I can't even do it with the people I so-called love the most? And actually after that teaching, I actually stopped talking back to my mom. She was so shocked. That's why she supported me going for Buddhist class. She's like, it's like she stopped needing, like, wow, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll wear what you want me to wear. Okay, all right, I'll come home early, I'll have dinner, yeah. And then after that, of course, then I started to get very active and became a nun, and that was a whole different issue that she got very upset about for different reasons. And then and just even within the 10-kilometer radius, my own little contribution there was, we lived in a private housing estate. So I thought, what can we do to improve the circumstances here? We weren't recycling back then. Recycling is not mandated by law in Singapore. So I wrote a letter to the committee suggesting, you might want to set up recycling bins for us. And they did. So it was not so hard. Like small things that you do in your daily life in the area you live in. So that teaching really shifted how I think about what it means to have quote, quote, world peace. Because we have to start where we are, right? With our own practice, with what's going on with our mind today, with the people I live with, right? Because if I flew out to Iran right now, I would not be helpful at all. I would be a liability to the people on the ground. They would have to figure out how to house another person and feed them, and what skills do I actually have that could help? Like, counseling? I'm going to teach you meditation? I don't think so, So better I stay here, I deal with my anger and try and get along with the people I live with without too much collateral damage from day to day, right? And that's where it all starts. So I think, that's how we can integrate the practices that we're doing. This is our genuine contribution to world peace, as we work with our anger moment by moment, and we bring that into our interpersonal relationships, that is our contribution. We're not acting on our anger and overwhelmed by that anymore, and creating like a very different environment around us. I think that addresses the question that came up in the Q&A yesterday. Maybe it was from Therese, right, or someone else. It was about where to start, because I think we've heard a lot of information all weekend, right? And it's like, where to start? And then you get this kind of slightly new agey answer, which is start where you are. But it's true. Start where you are. And I would say start with your most urgent problem or your biggest affliction, right? The one that's tormenting you or creating the most problems in your life. That's where we have to start. I will say that's where I started. When I first met the Dharma, the most pressing question I had was, why did my ex-boyfriend dump me? And how can I be less mad about this? Because he's off on the beach having fun and I'm just miserable, Like, that was the biggest problem. I'm so angry. How do I get over this? Will anyone love me ever again? And such pressing existential questions, right? But that's what drove me to the cushion. But that's what made me show up in class. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? Why am I so mad? Why do I suffer? How do I understand this? Yeah. And, so as we go to class and we listen, that's how we figure out how to work with these different states of mind. And I think all weekend we've heard about the importance of study, right? That without studying, we won't know what to meditate on. And one story I thought of that just really stuck in my mind too was some years ago there was a businessman who requested Venerable Children for some instruction on meditation. Yeah, so. And he was not a Buddhist. He, I think, owned nightclubs. Yeah, so had a very different life. But for whatever reason, he got interested in meditation. And there was this Buddhist teacher in town. So he requested if he could meet her and get some instruction on this thing called meditation. And so I was with her when she met with him. And what she did was she started talking about, what is happiness? What are the causes of happiness? What is suffering? What are the causes of suffering? And in the middle of this conversation, he's like, are you going to teach me to meditate? How come we're not like doing posture stuff or, breathing? And then all she said was, well, you have to hear teachings first. If you don't know anything about the worldview, the mind, why we meditate, you're not going to know what to meditate on. You're just going to be sitting there breathing or like that's not meditation. You're not actually familiarizing your mind with something virtuous. That's what the root word in Tibetan is kom, which means to familiarize. That's the word used for meditation or cultivation or practice. And you're trying to steer your mind in the direction of virtue, not just to kind of zone out and kind of numb out from what's going on in your life. Yeah. So, okay, he accepted that answer. And she went on to talk about forgiveness, because really his biggest, most urgent problem at the time was that he wasn't getting along with his father. This man had many successful businesses, a wonderful spouse, lovely children, everything that you think will make you happy externally. I think he owned a boat. What else could you want in life? He was miserable. Why? Because of this long-standing conflict with his father, his own, expectations of that relationship. It was really bringing a lot of pain in his life. And Venerable Children basically just talked to him about forgiveness. And she wound up guiding a meditation on forgiveness and said, this is what you need to do. And do it repeatedly. So I don't know if he took it to heart. But yeah, so that was like a good lesson for me to see, how does meditation really work? You're dealing with what's coming up in your mind and in your daily life, and you're working with it to transform your mind, and that will necessarily transform the relationships that you have. Yeah. Because I don't know about you, like we can go back to what Venerable Jigme was saying in the first teaching. I mean, we've all tried to change other people. And I don't know if that's gotten you very far. It's not gotten me very far. Like, good luck, if she had told this man, yeah, go try and change your dad. Right? Like, go, I don't know, do whatever he asks you to do and don't talk or whatever. Yeah, it's like, it's not going to happen that way. Yeah, so the best advice she could give was, it's your anger with your father that's making you miserable. Your father can do what he wants, right? But if you can let go of that anger, if you can forgive him, that's an opening into reducing the mental suffering and finding inner happiness. Yeah. So that's how the study and the meditation, work together with our life. And that's how we take our practice off the cushion. So kind of to reinforce that, I thought to read some of my favorite passages from this book that you've heard about, Guided Buddhist Meditations. And this section on cultivating our motivation is one that I turn to repeatedly because, it's been so helpful to me over the years. So this is page 26, Cultivating a Proper Motivation. And here Venerable Children writes, you may begin your meditation session, by asking yourself, why am I meditating? Sit and observe the reasons that spring up in your mind. They may be, I want to be more relaxed, or I'm angry and want to be calm, or my friend or teacher said meditating will help me, so I want to try it. Whatever your motivation is, don't judge it. Just observe. I think it's that last line that's been so helpful to me, because I don't know, I have a lot of expectations about what my practice should be or what my motivation should be, right? It's like, you've been Buddhist for so long, it should be something higher than I want to relax. But sometimes that's all, that's what I need today, right? And don't judge it, just observe. Start where you are. It's okay. And what's my motivation today? Boy, I just had this big argument with so-and-so in the kitchen. I just need to calm down and see what's going on. Fair enough, right? Not every session is, I want to be Buddha for the benefit of all beings, right? And that's something, and then the rest of this section, she talks about how we build our motivation. So I think that's something really important to remember too, like start where we are and build from it. From wanting to be less upset about abuse workers, from wanting to have less conflict with my mom, over time that expanded, and I changed my whole life, So that motivation, you can build on it as you study, as you hear teachings, and you've got to build it in a way that is authentic for you. So at the conclusion of this section, she gives some really helpful advice for our practice in general, where Venerable says, the importance of having an expansive Dharma motivation cannot be emphasized enough. Not only does it determine the karmic or long-term effects of our actions, but also it gives meaning and purpose to our lives right now. It enables us to have joy and courage to continue practicing the Dharma. Over the years, I've been a monastic and a Dharma student. I've noticed that people who cultivate a long-term motivation are able to sustain their practices their entire lives. They remain peaceful even when they face difficulties the rest of us would moan about. On the other hand, I've seen people who have excellent external conditions for practice but cannot sustain their Dharma practice. Most of them seem to have weak long-term motivations. Perhaps they began by being inspired by a determination to be free or bodhicitta, but over time they did not nourish that intention, and so it gradually deteriorated. The 8 worldly concerns, craving sense pleasures, possessions, praise, and a good reputation, as well as aversion to not getting these 4, snuck back in. They lost their self-confidence and trust in the efficacy of the Dharma as old habits reasserted themselves. This is indeed sad. For this reason, continuously nurturing our positive intentions and respecting our spiritual aspirations are essential. Has this happened to anyone? Where you started off with the best of long-term motivations, and along the way, I don't know, you just decided you wanted to go watch a movie instead of go to the Dharma talk. Or maybe it's time to just go on holiday to Bali instead of coming to the Abbey for retreat. Wouldn't that be better, Yeah? Am I the only one who's done that? No. Right, other people have. And when you catch yourself, after you've gone to Bali and you've gotten sunburned on the beach, and you're like, maybe I should have gone to the Abbey. Now I'm just tired and sunburned. That's, you catch yourself, right? Then you can bring yourself back. Right? Do not beat yourself up, okay, for kind of slipping in your practice. I mean, this passage is one that I've just come back to so many times because it just reminds me how this is a very long path, right? We start off with great motivations and inspiration. There are times where like, yes, on fire, I'm going to attain first jhana or whatever it is we want to attain. And then other things happen. Right? Obstacles arise. And if we don't continuously nurture our good motivation, our long-term aspirations, it's very easy to slip up or have the mind take a complete U-turn, or as she says, old habits sneak in and they hijack our practice, they take over. And when we notice that, then it's time to realize, oh, okay, I'm going off course. Don't get into a self-shaming pit or whatever. It's like, all right, this is normal. This is an old habit. I've nourished it for eons. I've caught it this time. I can come right back and just come back to our motivation. Yeah. So I don't know. That's how that's what's helped me in my practice. Yeah. Because if I stayed in that self-shaming pit, I wouldn't get back to the cushion. I would be in Bali right now, running a nonprofit. What else would I be doing? So yeah. we are getting more information about our afflictions and how to work with them. So anytime I slip up, that's what I tell myself. Okay, so how do we keep nourishing our positive intentions? How do we keep respecting our spiritual aspirations, especially because, all these different obstacles can arise? It's exactly what you've experienced this weekend. Having a daily practice like this that has all these different parts, right, that help us to, take refuge, right? We reflect on what it is that we turn to when we're having difficulties. We generate the 4 immeasurables, right? We go through the 7 limb prayer, as Venerable Semke went through, right? All of these practices, as we do a daily practice once, twice a day, right, that has all these different components, that's a very powerful way to keep coming back to our long-term spiritual aspirations. Yeah. So, you can take what works for you. This is a general structure, right? And you've heard teachings about it, right? So you can, as Venerable Tarpa said, you can go through recitations quickly and focus on the meditation. You can take as long as you want with different parts, right? So depending on where you are that day, that's what you can do. Another thing I really love about these practices is that they engage our body, speech, and mind, right? It's like a very active embodied process, right? There's descriptions of how to sit in meditation, or there are things you do with your hands. You recite verses, and you also visualize. You bow. Yeah, I don't know. That helps me. I think I'm a very kinesthetic person, so it just helps engage everything, and you're purifying also your body, speech, and mind, because that's how we create both positive and negative actions as we engage with the world. So in terms of where we are in the kind of the root text, right, which is on page 19 of the Blue Book, that's where you get the extensive description of the Shakyamuni Buddha practice, right? We've talked about how to prepare the space, right? How to clean the space ahead of time, set up offerings, right? It helps to be in a certain kind of space that supports our practice. We've talked about how to set our mind in a virtuous direction, right? Preparing the posture, right? Settling the body, settling the mind, taking refuge, and so forth. And where we are now, what I'll talk about today, this morning, is starting from the Mandala Offering, going on to the end of the practice. Yeah, so you've heard about how the 7 limb prayer helps us to purify all these different afflictions, right? All these different non-virtuous states that disturb the mind, and also how to accumulate merit. Yeah, so Venerable Semke gave this wonderful analogy yesterday that you'll often hear, right? It's like you have this field, and at least when I look at my mind, I just remember one retreat where I felt like, wow, the field is covered with like old junkyard cars. It's like all these trashed cars are like piled up in this field of my mind. They're huge. And I felt like I had a small fork to try and remove them. That's the strength of my practice. I'm like, how are we going to get this car out of here? One piece at a time, right? Remove the tire one at a time, right? What else are you going to do? If you just leave it there, it's going to rust and rot in the rain and just sit there. So, okay, I have a small fork. Start with the hubcap. Go one piece at a time. At some point, you will remove that car. You'll turn that scrap metal into something useful. Yeah. So that's what the purification and accumulation of merit is about. Step 1, remove all the junk. Right? And then the weeds come. Remove all the weeds. And they keep coming, keep removing, right? And then see if you can plant some native grasses that will help naturally take over and restore the land to its health. Yeah. So the Mandala Offering is part of that. Yeah. So in the root text it says, right, after you've done the 7 limb prayer, right, you have the field of merit in the space in front of you. It says, with the wish to offer everything in the universe in order to receive Dharma teachings and to realize them in your mind stream, imagine the entire universe and everything beautiful in it, and respectfully offer it to the field of merit. So, hold up, right? To offer everything in the universe to receive Dharma teachings. Why would I want to do that? Right? We live in a time where it's so easy to receive Dharma teachings. I just have to turn on my computer and click, Dharma teachings. Okay, 1,000 videos show up. What do you mean I have to offer the universe to get this? It's free. I can watch whatever I want when I want it. Yes, there are people at home right now having their warm cup of tea, they're relaxing, eating chips, while all the people on site are suffering and sitting in these uncomfortable chairs in the back, trying to figure out what people are saying. Right? Why bother? Right? So I think, here the Mandala Offering really helps us to check up, what do we value? Right? It helps us reframe what do we value? How much do we actually value the Dharma? Why do we value the Dharma? And what are we willing to kind of give up or go through to receive these teachings that will benefit us? So, props to everybody who's here who had to drive or fly to get to the Abbey, to come to this kind of environment, give up their cell phones to receive teachings, right? And I'm sure each of us can decide for ourselves whether that's worth it or not. Or is it just better to just, stay in your house, sit in your jammies, watch a talk, get bored, turn it off, go do something else, right? The effect on the mind is so different. Yeah, so here we are shifting how we relate to the world and what we value when we offer the mandala. So this word mandala is Sanskrit, and it means, it's translated into Tibetan as kilkor, which means the center and its surroundings. And it means, the entire universe. Yeah, the center and the surroundings represent the world we live in. Yeah, and so you've heard that we visualize everything that's beautiful and we offer it up. And as with all our other practices, there's a physical mudra, and probably you can't see it very clearly, but you can get other monastics to show you later. You hook your fingers together, and in the middle is Mount Meru, right? This is the ancient Indian cosmology of the representation of the universe. There's a mountain in the middle, right? There are 4 continents around the mountain. We live on one of them. And then there's like these iron fences around the edge, and then there are other realms, both on the mountain, below, in between the fences as well. Yeah. So anyhow, this is, I see this as a symbolic representation of the universe, and you're using your body to represent that. You'll see other people offer the mandala too with like a mandala offering set, and they're visualizing all the different parts of the universe, right? And instead of hanging on to what's beautiful and what's wonderful in the universe just for ourselves, which is our kind of habitual action, instead we're visualizing it to offer it up, right? You'll see in the verse that is recited, right? So often we'll do the mandala offering, and we'll recite, this ground anointed with perfume, flower strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Right? So instead of hanging on to what's beautiful and what's, what we cherish in this world just for ourselves alone to enjoy, we're offering it up. We're transforming it into something that all beings might be able to enjoy. Right? So even if we can't do it physically, actually in life, it's a beautiful mental shift, right? Instead of the kind of miserliness and stinginess that just wants to hang on to things for this one, we're saying, what if I offer this to the 3 jewels? What if I offer this to all beings? What would the effect of that be? And I think here too, this is one piece where what we studied also helps to support this practice, right? Because the assumption here is that, giving up attachment, giving up our obsession with beautiful, wonderful things is actually going to help us in our practice. Right, so that's an assumption there, right? Because unless you actually believe that, you're like, why do I want to give this up, right? And so just very briefly, when we talk about attachment, I don't think anyone's given a definition of that yet, right? When we talk about attachment in the Buddhist context, we're talking about a state of mind that is exaggerating good qualities of an object, right? So the object might be pleasant or good looking or bring some temporary happiness, but our mind is exaggerating those good qualities. It's making them permanent or everlasting, or deliver more than it actually can, right? That's one aspect of attachment. Or it's projecting good qualities that are not even there, right? And then based on that projection, then we cling on to that object. We become very upset or frustrated when we separate from it. Yeah. So this is not a state of mind that's in touch with reality, right? And it's going to create a lot of pain and suffering, right? So that's why we want to give it up. Yeah. So the problem is not the beautiful mountains and trees and lakes. I mean, they're gorgeous. Yeah. It's the attachment to them that we're trying to release, to let go of. The mind that's like, oh, if I do not take a walk today, this is just the worst. I've got to get out there. And yeah, that's exaggerating the good qualities of something, of a place or a person. If I don't live in this place, I'm going to be miserable forever. Or if so-and-so is not in my life anymore, if they won't take my calls, yeah, what is the point of living anymore, right? As we hear in all these terrible songs on the radio, right? Why does the sun go on shining, and so forth? Sorry, I'm so sorry for people who know this song. Stop. But that's the nature of what we call love, right? It's this kind of attachment, right? I can't live without you. It's like you have to check up, I think you would be just fine. It's not that extreme. Yeah, but that's the kind of mind we're seeking to purify, because it gets in the way of our practice. True or not true? Examples? Anyone have the courage to share one or two? How does attachment get in the way of your practice, and why do you want to let go of it? Venerable Samke.
I've worked a lot on the more physical stuff, but I'm hugely attached to my opinion. Hugely attached to being right. And if there's any disagreement around that, I will spend an entire meditation session being the prosecuting attorney against the person who's defying my opinion. And so I just get wound up in a whole story about how that opinion matters for the long-term existential existence of everything. And so even though I'm monastic, it looks like I've simplified my life. I've got a whole bunch of attachment going on to views and opinions.
Thank you. That's very profound. I would just say, yeah. So you see us monastic, you look like you're sitting so peacefully, but inside it's like, so and so they broke this rule. Ding. 1 hour of I can't believe so and so didn't put this in the right place. Like, was that really a meditation session? All right, sorry. Go ahead. So I don't know your name. You are Terry, please. Yeah. Oh, but let's get the microphone to you. Terry and then Dania after that.
I have an attachment to having to be right about everything or control stuff. And so it's been a process to try to even start letting go of that. But it's coming along, but it's really hard. I mean, I've been doing it for a long, long time. And I've only been in Buddhism about maybe a year. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. But yeah, it's a process. But once you start catching yourself, like you say, it's like, okay, I want him to do this, but oh no, that's what he's doing. So I have to accept what he's doing or her or whatever, So that's my deal.
And you've made it through this weekend so far. I mean, it's like, there are how many, 20 nuns and monks telling you what to do? Like, no, you can't do this. You have to sit here now. Show up at this time. You seem just fine.
I had the realization during one of the guided meditations before the retreat. It was actually afterwards about an attachment I have to my puppy dog. And right before the retreat, she got very sick. And I was so attached to her permanence, and thank you for your words, the projecting qualities of an object that didn't exist. Now, logically, my mind knows my dog is not going to live forever. My dog is not going to be healthy for the rest of her life. But in that moment of her sickness, I was so attached that, oh my gosh, my dog is, and I don't know what, and I can't, and my brain went 10,000 miles ahead. And I made myself sick, not sleeping, not eating. What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of her? We're going to the vet. Oh my gosh, what's going to, and just... My mind stream was like, Niagara Falls. And we get to the vet. My dog's like, I'm good. Just totally fine. And I was like, that's great. Thank you for a week of, And so here I'm, after this meditation, my brain went, oh, yeah, okay. So had I approached that week of her sickness with the knowledge of course, dogs get sick. I will handle this with grace. I will handle this with patience. I will handle this with calm. At some point, she will not be sick anymore. At some point, she's going to die. That may be this week. That may be next week. I do not know when this is coming, but I don't decide this. That's not my choice. So I will accept this. Like, I would not have had a Niagara Fall mind. I would have had a calm stream mind. So that was, a good revelation to have. And next time I will be better prepared for that.
Thank you. That is so powerful. That's really the point of our whole practice, right? Going back to the first teaching Venerable Jigme gave, that, impermanence is staring us in the face, but the depth of our ignorance, this is really ignorance. I'm not saying this as if this is a pejorative term, right? It's like, we know this intellectually. Yeah, people I love, animals I care about are gonna die, but then it actually happens. It's like, no, you were supposed to be here forever. That's the ignorance, right? We cannot actually see some very gross impermanence. Or you start to need more sleep as you get older, or your parts hurt. It's like, what? It's like, hello, this is a normal part of having a body, but I get irritated. How come this hurts? It's not supposed to hurt. Aging, right? Yeah, but for sure the impermanence one, yeah. And so this is why we practice again and again, right? Giving away things that we're attached to, starting to loosen this grip. Yeah, so imagining offering your puppy to the Buddha, imagining this person who you want to control. Imagine them doing what you want them to do and offer that to the Buddha. Imagine so-and-so who just won't listen to you, Venerable Semke, offering them to the Buddha. Might be me, I don't know. So everybody here. Oh, that's why, when I asked Venerable Children what she offers in her mandala, she offers the monastic community. Maybe it's because we don't listen to her. No, she said she offers communities of practitioners. She said it she wants environments where people can practice. Yes, but that could be part of it. Oh, Buddha, please, just take them. Yeah, but that's a nice move, from offering external objects, right, that we're very attached to. And we also offer inner states. Right? There's something called the inner offering. And so when we get to the next verse, right, after this ground anointed with perfume and so forth, and then we say the objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, right, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Yeah. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me to be free from the three poisonous attitudes, right? Me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Right, so here we're getting one layer deeper. It's not just offering up external objects, we're offering up these internal afflictions and states that we work with. And one very powerful way to do what's called the inner offering is to offer up our body. And so I'm just going to briefly describe it. Yeah, because theory is, and you have to check up for yourself, right, one of the things that we're most attached to is this body. Right? We identify with it as me, right? This is me. Yeah, and it's supposed to be permanent. Like I said, it's not supposed to change. It's not supposed to age. It's not supposed to fall sick. Just check up. When you're sick, what are some of the underlying beliefs that come up, right? Like, this is a failure, or so-and-so, it's so-and-so who gave me the disease. It's their fault. It's like, causes and conditions, right? You've created the cause to fall sick. Or you have this body. It is in the nature to get sick. Yeah, but it's just so curious when these things happen, what we blame. Yeah, to the point where the whole nation blames a pandemic on another country or a race of people. This is just how we think, right? So-and-so, and it's always, it's either a minority race or some minority group of people that brought the disease. This is a researched and studied phenomenon. So check up, true or not true. What's the mind doing there? Yeah. So this is from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives website, where he describes how you imagine that your skin becomes the surface of the ground and is a golden ground. Yeah, you transform your blood into an ocean of nectar. You imagine that your flesh becomes beautiful flowers floating in the nectar. Your stomach becomes Mount Meru. Your hands and feet become the four worlds, and the upper and lower parts of your arms and legs become the 8 subworlds. Your head becomes a beautiful palace on top of Mount Meru. Your heart becomes a beautiful jewel adorning the top of this palace. Your eyes become the sun and moon, and all your inner organs become wonderful possessions and enjoyments of gods and humans. So here, you're transforming this ordinary body into something quite beautiful and marvelous and offering it up. Yeah, so you can try this out. I've done it a few times. One time I led it in a Chenrezig retreat, and some poor person in the group later said, this sounded like a horror movie. Like so gory, right? Like your intestines are around the mountain. That was the detailed description Venerable had given. And I was just, repeating what she said in the teaching. I'm like, oh, this was actually very disturbing for people in meditation. So, see what you're ready for. Just remember that this is meant to help us overcome our attachment to this body, okay, of seeing it as, seeing it as so important and something we want to cling on to. We imagine transforming it and offering it up. Okay, so that's just one option. It is an advanced practice. Yeah. Yeah. All right, just offering it up. But it's so gross. And it's like all this stuff coming out. All right. So, okay, anyhow, so that's one aspect of the practice. But the point here is we're transforming, this very limited idea of ourselves, I think, that we just cling on to. That who am I, this body? Who am I, this mind? That I can't change. Or what do I care about? These specific things, people, places, my world just becomes so small when I'm following my attachment, right? That's all I can think of in this moment when I'm overwhelmed with attachment. I don't think about people elsewhere on this planet who don't have resources. I'm just like concerned about, I want to be right now, and you're not listening to me. Yeah. So we're practicing to kind of open up our minds to let go of this kind of very limiting perspective and to consider that we have a bigger potential. We can go beyond this attachment to just this life and what we have here and now. So here I just wanted to share, this is Robert Priest's kind of rewriting of the Mandala Offering. I found it so helpful, and and many people are nodding because they have, because I think sometimes this Indian cosmology, it feels so alien, right? It's like, okay, there's this mountain and continents, and it's not scientifically accurate. That's what we're like, okay, maybe we're not fascinated by the symbology of it. So this Robert Priest, I believe, is a longtime practitioner of Tantra, and he's also a psychologist, as I understand it. So he wrote this book called The Psychology of Tantra, which talks about how all these visualization practices, these recitations that we do are actually a very powerful psychological method, right? That's, I guess, the modern way of saying it. We would just say it's a way of transforming the mind, of training the mind. So this is how he kind of has retranslated the Mandala Offering. So there's a long Mandala Offering text. Yeah. So this is what he wrote. You start with doing some Sanskrit mantras, and he says, this is the basic open ground, the ground of my being. Here is the center of my totality. This is the center of my totality, the axis mundi. This is the environment in which I live. These are the oceans and mountains, the lakes and rivers, the rocks and trees. These are the beautiful places I treasure, the plants and flowers, the wildlife. These are the cities and towns that I live and work in, their value and downfall. These are the people I live among and work among. They are my friends and acquaintances, those I depend upon. These are the people I struggle with, the objects of my aversion and confusion. Here is my work, my livelihood, my action in the world. This is my home, my garden, and my possessions, the things I treasure and value, and the objects of attachment. These are my loved ones, my family, my private life. This is the body I inhabit in this life. These are my sense pleasures, the food, the music, the beauty I value. These are my dreams, my ambitions, my plans. These are all those things I wish for in my life that may or may not come to pass. These are my qualities, my talents, and my gifts. This is the knowledge and learning I have gained in my life. These are my habits, my emotional problems, my wounds. This is the core of my identity. that I hold on to as real. This is the spiritual journey I am on. These are the qualities and realizations I aspire to. These are the obstacles and difficulties on the path. These are the essential ingredients of my awakening. This is the treasure of my Buddha potential. This symbolizes my awakening, my victory over the confusion and suffering of myself and the confusion and suffering of all sentient beings. I offer this mandala of my essential totality and offer my being to all the Buddhas for the welfare of all sentient beings. Please bestow your inspiration, all those objects of my mind's three poisons, coveted friend, foe, and stranger, body, wealth, worldly pleasures, without a feeling of loss I offer. Receive them, please, and free all beings from their bondage. Then idam guru ratna mandala kam niryatayami. So that final mantra means, I send forth this mandala to you, precious gurus. So powerful translation, yeah? I would say that's what we're trying to work with internally when we offer the mandala. All the objects that we're attached to, we're averse to, our entire core of your identity, instead of clinging onto it so hard, offering it up and requesting inspiration to work with what gets in the way of our practice, our attachment, anger, and ignorance. Yeah. So, you can find that text and try doing that and see what effect that has. I think it's very powerful doing that at least once a day. So, yes. Oh, Robert Preece. Yeah. Last name Preece. Yeah. And the text is called The Psychology of Tantra. Yeah. And Venerable Children has read this text out before in classes too. So it is also posted on her website in full. Yeah, if you don't want to get into this book that could be quite advanced or complex. It might be too much at the beginning. So you can find this on her website, and we can send that around after retreat. I can get the link to our retreat manager to send this text to everyone. Yeah. So basically, with the mandala offering, we start with offering objects in their ordinary form, but as we practice, then we mentally transform them, right? And we imagine the world as a pure land and offer it in that form. So here we might wonder, what is a pure land? What is a Buddha land, right? Imagine as a Buddha land and offer it to you. So it is said that, the Buddhas create in this whole path you've heard, we create a tremendous amount of merit. And the purpose of that is not just for ourselves to have our practice go well, but to create the opportunities and circumstances for others to benefit and practice as well. So it's said that, through this tremendous accumulation of merit, a Buddha can manifest a place, a land, where the circumstances are completely conducive for others to practice in. Right? So beings that have a connection with that Buddha, can be reborn in that land. And in that land, everything is the Dharma. The traditional descriptions of, say, Amitabha's Pure Land will say, when the wind blows through the trees, you will hear the Dharma. The birds sing the Dharma. So everything around you is just encouraging and supporting your practice. So, yeah, I don't know. Sravasti Abbey, I think, is a bit of a pure land on earth. Some monasteries are set up that way. Everything is meant to support our practice. And this place is built by the collective merit of all of us who come here. Everybody who's contributed. And of course, our teacher and founder, Venerable Children, who had the vision to create such a place. Right? So even in this life, in this world, we can see how a place can grow from the collective virtue of ordinary beings. Venerable Children, I don't think is an ordinary being. I am. But what more, someone, an enlightened being, right? Of course, they might have the ability to manifest such places for us to practice in. So that's what we're imagining. All the beautiful things that we receive or hanker after, instead of clinging on to them for ourselves, we imagine transforming them into what others can use, what will benefit others, and it supports everyone's practice. And Venerable Children also mentioned that when we do this kind of transformation of ordinary objects, it cuts through our wrong conceptions and poor quality view. especially our depressed and cynical view of the world. So I find that a very helpful tip, because if I really thought about, if I just offered up the world in its ordinary form, like, does the Buddha really want the United States of America? I don't know, or like, right? If I just got stuck there, like, okay, the Congress is not talking and so forth, like, okay, instead of getting stuck there, why not transform it? Here's a functioning government. It's a country where oh, stop it, everyone. Where people actually feel safe and, the borders are open. And just offer that up, whatever it is, to transform this kind of nothing will change, the world's the way it is and it sucks kind of view. If I might take a risk, I'm just going to read you the lyrics of my absolute favorite song ever that I think is a Mandala Offering when I think about it. I don't know if many people have heard of Rufus Wainwright, the wonderful Canadian singer-songwriter. As monastics, we have precepts not to sing, so I cannot sing this for you. But, he has a song called Oh, What a World, right? And there are two verses that I often think about with the Mandala Offering, right? He starts with, why am I always on a plane or a fast train? Oh, what a world my parents gave me, always traveling but not in love. Still, I think I'm doing fine. Wouldn't it be a lovely headline? Life is beautiful on the New York Times, right? It's a shift, right? You could get stuck in this, how did I get here? Who made the world like this? And it's just on the tip of a thought, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Venerable Children's teacher, would say. It's just a shift. I'm doing fine. There are beautiful things in life. Why don't I offer that up? It's so curious. I actually looked up what he said about the song, and he said, I was very numb. It was about looking at the world and seeing what's actually there, not feeling either good or bad about it, just feeling apart. I was grasping at some kind of mantra, like even though the world is a strange place, you're still on the train, you paid for your ticket, and it's going to arrive at some point. Yeah, so the wisdom of a songwriter about the world. Yeah, but here we know it's not just that we've gotten on the train and we don't have a choice about where it winds up. Yeah, as practitioners, we're trying to make sure the train pulls in at the awakening station. Right? So we're transforming this world. We're not getting stuck in this ordinary view, but we want to transform how we see the world. Right. So at the end of this Mandala Offering, right, so you can do the mudra if you wish, recite that verse, you're doing the visualizations, you're working with making offerings, and then you visualize that all the beings in the field of merit receive your offerings with delight. The offerings dissolve into light and absorb into the Buddha's heart. From his heart, light radiates to you, filling your body and mind, inspiring you to accomplish the path. Yeah. So, we have to ask, why are we making offerings to the three jewels, right? As we say, they're enlightened beings. They don't need our intestines or body or whatever it is we're offering. They don't need our puppy dog. They don't need our attachment to being right. Why are we making these offerings? I love it every time Venerable says, you become a Buddha and then you get an apple, some oranges and avocados. It's like, and the apple's fake, right? So great, you work so hard for the sake of sentient beings, and they give you some avocados. Okay, what are you supposed to do with that, right? So I think you've heard, what we're doing here is we're trying to open our minds to the influence of awakened beings. And maybe I think of it in terms of how, when I was little, when I really appreciated my teachers, my parents, you just naturally want to give them something, right? Yeah, it's just teachers know this on Teachers' Day, the kids just want to give you something. They hand make a card. Yeah, that's what I used to do. You just want to make something to say thank you. Thank you for teaching me, for guiding me, for showing me how to spell. Yay, right? So there's some aspect of that. I think it's just cultivating that heart of gratitude. And that these are beings who are showing us the path to awakening. Wow, I slip up, I mess up. I forget to do my practice. I sleep through my practice, whatever it is. And they didn't give up. They weren't like, forget it, you can't join the club, right? It's like, no, they're still there. Teaching. What my teacher has been through to try and get through to this one, So offering something up out of gratitude, offering up my practice, saying, I'm going to do my best to listen and put what you've taught into practice. I think that's a very natural movement when we have that mind of gratitude and appreciation. Here too, I wanted to share briefly this story of Lama Atisha, who you've heard about a lot, I think yesterday, but maybe people don't quite know who he is. So the Buddha Dharma spread to Tibet, I think in the 8th century, right? And it was flourishing under various Dharma kings. And then it happened that there was one king who was anti-Buddhist, and so in a very short period of time destroyed a lot of temples, made a lot of practitioners disrobe. The whole monastic order almost died out, right? But fortunately, it didn't. And then some time later, there was a king named Yeshe who was very faithful, and he really wanted to see the Dharma revive in Tibet. And so he wanted to invite Lama Atisha. So Atisha was very well known. Was he at Nalanda at the time or Vikramasila? Yeah. One of the monasteries. He was very well known in that monastery as being a great scholar and adept. And this king thought, we must find a way to invite him to come to teach, right? To revive these teachings that have almost died out, because he valued them so much. And the part of the story that moves me the most is that he was king, and then he gets captured by another king from some other kingdom, and he's in jail. And his nephew Jangchup is told, if you want to get your uncle released, you have to give me his weight in gold. So this poor nephew goes around trying to find that kind of wealth. So he accumulates enough wealth, except for the head of Yeshe. And so he goes and he tells his uncle, I'm so sorry, I'm trying my best. I just have this much left to accumulate and we'll get you out. And Yeshe says, don't bother trying to get me out of prison. It's more important that you use this wealth to bring Lama Atisha to Tibet. So don't use this money to get me out. Take it and bring it to India to invite this great master to come. And then subsequently, the story goes that he died in prison. So I was like, wow, just how much he valued the Dharma above his own life, right? That said, you have to, at all costs, do whatever you can to bring the teachings back to Tibet, because they are going to benefit so many people. Just that mind. I often think of that too, and what it means to offer up the world. And for me, this relates to the next part of kind of connecting with this lineage of spiritual mentors. Because I think all of us have read stories about what practitioners have gone through to preserve these teachings that come to us today. So just starting from Venerable Chödrön, right? You can, as you get to know her and hear about everything she went through to go to Nepal to receive the teachings, and then India, right? All the difficulties the first generation of Western monastics went through. She did not have a place to come to within driving distance like this. She gave up her job, she gave up her married life. But she was so happy studying in Nepal and India, but falling sick, all the visa problems, all kinds of challenges, and she stuck it through. And she created this monastery so that the next generation doesn't have to go through that. It's incredible. And then you just keep going back. What her teachers went through, Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, who were refugees from Tibet, right, going through the occupation, the Chinese communist occupation of Tibet, leaving on foot across the mountains. Those stories are always incredible. Just about every Tibetan refugee can tell you that story from direct experience of watching people die in the snow, themselves almost freezing to death and so forth, going hungry, begging for food on the way, making this arduous journey by foot so that they could keep practicing. If they did not make that journey, we would not have the Dharma today, right? It would have died out in Tibet. And then we just keep going, right? Everything people went through, wars that happened in both Tibet, China. It's just astounding what, even just in this century, people have had to go through to keep the Dharma alive, to keep practicing. And then we go further and further back, right? Like people who went on foot from India to China or China to India to get the scriptures. I do a fair amount of translation work. So I'll just tell you one short story that always amazes me. The precepts that we have. No, this is not the Dharma Guptaka Vinaya. Okay, so anyhow, you have to imagine that in the past, nothing was written down, right? So the first translations were happening from people reciting things from memory. Yeah, so the story of how the Sravastivada Vinaya made it to China, as I understand it, is, Kumarajiva, a prominent Chinese translator, had invited someone who knew the Sravastivada Vinaya by heart. So he's reciting it. And so he recites in Sanskrit, right? And then there's someone, and Kumarajiva understands Sanskrit and is reciting, doing an oral translation into Chinese. And then he has a scribe, right, who understands Chinese, who's writing it down. His different students who are learning. And Kumarajiva himself, I think, is like from Kucha or some Middle Eastern country. And he learned Chinese because he was in captivity for 10 years. Anyway, it's a long story. So, it's like all this transmission. And in the middle of this recitation translation process, the reciter dies. So he's like, okay. So he has to go back to this village or something where all these people who have memorized the text live, invite another one to come, make that journey, and then continue reciting from memory and, translating. I'm like, wow. There was one translator who said, we only have two hands, right? So if you're holding a scroll and reading it out, you can't write down your translation. Someone else has to write it, because you're reading a scroll. So all these translations happen orally, right? You're sight reading and telling people what it says, and someone else is writing it down. So, that's this whole project of, so last one. And also, if you look at the Tibetan texts, they're all printed on woodblock printing. That means someone carved them in reverse to print them. It's like, what? And you couldn't make a mistake, right? What do? You throw away that block of wood. You have to start again. So just what people have gone through to preserve these teachings because they valued them. And then it is our responsibility now to keep it going, right? Not to just be like, we'll just, click whatever, it doesn't matter. It's like, if we really value these teachings, what are we going to do to keep them going in the world? So I think that's deeply tied in with the aspect of requesting inspiration, right? Because I think you've heard the description, right? We visualize our main teacher, right? The one who has touched our heart deeply with the Dharma, as kind of coming to the crown of our head and petitioning this entire lineage of spiritual mentors going all the way back to the Buddha to give us inspiration in our practice. So as Venerable Thubten mentioned, there's an extensive description of the kind of the lineage that we follow. I don't think there's a need to get into that detail. But here, you can also bring to mind all spiritual teachers you have benefited from, right, who you're so grateful to, all those practitioners that whose names we don't even know, who helped to bring this lineage to us, people who just got up and did their practice. Because of them, we have these practices today. And how grateful we feel. So we can tap into that. That's how I feel inspired, anyhow, to think of all these texts or practitioners or going all the way back in this unbroken line to the Buddha. And so we recite the text, right? Glorious and precious root guru, sit upon the lotus and moon seat on my crown, guiding me with your great kindness, bestow upon me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. The eyes through whom the vast scriptures are seen, supreme doors for the fortunate who would cross over to spiritual freedom, illuminators whose wise means vibrate with compassion, to the entire line of spiritual mentors I make request. And I think as I have studied more over the years, just these names in that lineage tree or refuge field just come to have so much more meaning. I will say at the start, I read that prayer, it's like, who are these people? Who's Atisha? Who's Dromtonpa? Who's Nagarjuna? Who? But again, not to have a closed mind, but to be like, okay, these are wise beings. I may not know anything about them now, but as I learn and study, as I actually read the teachings that I've heard teachings given on the text that they wrote that have been preserved, I see the impact on my mind. Then I feel this really strong sense of gratitude and connection. So even if the names in that lineage field and so forth are not what resonate with you now, bring to mind living teachers who you appreciate, and just use this space to appreciate their good qualities and ask for inspiration. Connect with them for inspiration. All right, so then all the figures in the field of merit melt into light and dissolve into the Buddha in front of you. And as the embodiment of the three jewels, the Buddha now absorbs into the Buddha on your crown. right? And then as you recite the Buddha's mantra, white light flows from the Buddha into you, purifying all negativities and obscurations, and generating within you all realizations of the stages of the path. So here, I think Venerable Chödrön often talks about, why this sadhana practice is like a very powerful psychological method. It's tapping into our predisposition to visualize, right? Where instead of, it's very difficult to, at least for me, for abstract qualities like love, compassion, sometimes it's like, what could that look like? Right? So I imagine them embodied in a physical form as a Buddha or as thousand-armed Chenrezig. Right? We imagine these abstract qualities embodied in these physical forms that we can relate to. Right? And so they come to the crown of our head, they inspire us. Right? But all this is happening within our mind. I think that's the most important thing. It's not some external being that's flying down from the heavens. This is all a process that's happening in our minds. I think you've heard again and again when we guide this practice, right? It's like, imagine a mind free of attachment, anger, and ignorance. Or imagine a mind filled only with good qualities. It starts there. And then this mind manifests in a physical form, so that we can connect with. Right, so that's what's happening with all this dissolving and so on, right? It's reminding us this is not some solid external deity figure that's here to fix us or help us. This is all happening in our mind. It's the embodiment of love, compassion, and wisdom we are seeking to embody ourselves, right? That's what's coming into us. We're receiving all these teachings that are going to help us cultivate these qualities. Yeah. So here we then go to the mantra recitation. And again, Venerable Chödrön will often talk about how, mantra also taps into our predisposition to use our mouth to generate idle talk or speech, right? Instead of all kinds of other mantras we like to say about ourselves or, I'm so lousy, I'm so lousy, I'm so lousy, I'm so lousy. Why am I distracted? Why am I distracted? I hate so-and-so, I hate so-and-so, I hate so-and-so. Instead of saying those mantras, we're going to say something different. We're going to say, Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Right? We're going to overcome that habit of these kinds of other mantras that we tend to run, whether mentally or even verbally. Right? We're going to override that with a mantra that's much more meaningful. So it's said that mantras are kind of syllables spoken in stages of deep realization by awakened beings. Right, so it's in this deep state of meditative equipoise that the Buddha spoke this mantra. And it's in Sanskrit. And here I'll just share Lama Zopa Rinpoche's kind of explanation of the different syllables of the mantra, because I know there are some people who like to know what the mantra means. For me personally, I don't actually need to know. I'm one of those like, the vibration is good kind of people. I don't know, as in I trust that these are moving the mind in a virtuous direction. I'm kind of more interested in the experiential aspect, but I know there are people who are like, I want to know. I would say most mantras, when I've read the translations, they are basically like the whole path to awakening summarized. So it becomes like a helpful mnemonic, right? Like reminding you, this is what I would like to be reciting and speaking and running in my mind. Yeah, instead of, I'm so bad, I'm not worthy. Like, why don't I override that with something else? So Lama Zopa says, Tayata means like that, right? How to achieve enlightenment, right? And the last syllable, Soha, means establishing the base in your heart by having devotion. Right? If you have that, you actualize the meaning of Muni, Muni. Right? So the first Muni, he says, refers to completing the graduated path of the lower capable being. By having ceased attachment to this life, all superstitious concepts are ceased. Right. So yesterday, I think you heard about how our practice can be divided according to kind of our aspirations on the spiritual path. Right. So he's saying that the first Muni is for the being with what we call of the lowest scope, right? The being that wants to overcome attachment to this life and have a good future life. Right. So that's the first Muni. Right. And then the second Muni is having accomplished the graduated path of the middle capable being. So who has ceased attachment to kind of the pleasures of samsara, this cyclic existence. Right? So this is a being who doesn't just want a good rebirth in the cycle of rebirth, but who actually wants to get out. Yeah, so that's the second Muni. Right? And here Lama Zopa says, Muni can also mean ceasing ignorance through realizing emptiness. And this can contain, all the teachings. Basically, all the 3 vehicles that you heard about yesterday, whether you are striving to be an arhat or to be a Buddha, all the vehicles, all the teachings are contained in Muni, Muni. Right. And then the third, Maha Munaye, he says, means having ceased the self-centered thought by actualizing the Mahayana path. So basically, the whole path to awakening is encompassed in Tayata Om Muni Muni Maha Munaye Soha. And when you completely actualize these, right, Tayata like that, right, Soha, you establish the base, and then you accomplish Muni Muni Maha Munaye. What happens is Om, which symbolizes your purified body, speech, and mind. So Om represents the pure body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, and you're able to work perfectly for sentient beings. Right. So, that's a lot to hold in mind. Right. You're having this visualization. Here's the enlightened being above your crown, white light, golden light, and you're saying this mantra, basically requesting inspiration or kind of opening your mind to all the stages of the path, right? Strengthening your resolve to accomplish them so you can be fully awakened. Right? And here, reminding ourselves, it goes in stages. You start with a good rebirth. Then you go on to wanting to be free of all of cyclic existence. Then you go on to wanting to do this for the sake of all beings. You don't just want to be liberated yourself. Right? So that's one way to work with the mantra. Yeah. So again, there's a lot going on. So you should just focus on what your mind feels ready for, or that works for you. I've spent a long time just focusing on the light or just focusing on the mantra. Yeah, so it's a slow process. Right. So after doing all of this, right, as Venerable Thubten mentioned, this is then after doing the mantra recitations, that's when you do an analytical meditation on the stages of the path. Right, so that could be any of the teachings you've heard, you make a little outline, or you follow this wonderful book that has outlines for every topic. And you just spend that time reflecting on it the way you've heard it guided here. Yeah. Here I will say, you can also build in your concentration meditation just before you do the analytic meditation. I think you've heard it guided many different ways. Yeah, some people like to do the concentration meditation at the very beginning, even before taking refuge. I like to do it just after taking refuge to remind myself I'm not just breathing to feel good, but this is my spiritual practice. I'm focusing my mind for a bigger purpose. So, you can fit it in there, right, at the very beginning, the concentration, where you just focus on one object to calm the mind, or you can put it in here, right, just before the mantra recitation or after it, right, and then you do an analytic meditation after that. Right. Then it says, at the conclusion of your meditation, the Buddha on your head melts into light and dissolves into you. Your body, speech, and mind become inseparable from those of the Buddha. Yeah, meditate. So I think it's important to always make some time for that. Yeah, sometimes we skip over that step, but for me, it's like an integrating kind of moment. It's like a reminder, all these wonderful qualities I've aspired toward, I already have some seed of them. I'm not so far away. I'm moving in the right direction. I'm really trying to become these qualities. It will happen someday, right? So just focus on that. Yeah, reminding myself of my potential. And then at the very end, we do a dedication of merit. I think we've heard about that yesterday already. Here that, all this effort we've put into our practice, it's created a lot of positive energy in the mind. Yeah? I don't know if usually at the end of session, does anyone come out feeling like angry or discouraged or sad? Maybe sometimes, yeah, depending. Okay, all right, but for different reasons, right? Stuff we've cleared up. Yeah, you're working on something. You're moving in your practice, right? But you've also created a lot of virtue, right? You've spent that past hour not kind of ruminating and repeating your bad habits. You've not harmed anyone. You're actively cultivating your good qualities. That's a lot of what we call merit, a lot of positive potential, a lot of virtue. And instead of just keeping it for ourselves, again, we dedicate it to all beings. Yeah, so that's why we do this recitation at the end. I think the analogy often given is that if your merit is like a drop of water and you just leave one drop of water on the table, it's going to evaporate in the next hour, right? It's going to disappear. But if you put that drop in a cup of water or into the ocean, into a bigger body of water, then that drop of water doesn't evaporate and disappear. It kind of joins a bigger stream, a bigger pool. And so that's kind of the concept behind a dedication of merit. You know, you're kind of accumulating all these drops and steering them toward a much bigger goal, here being full awakening. So it doesn't just ripen in a delicious lunch later at 12. You know, like, oh, you know, you were generous in the... I mean, this is a theory, right? You were generous in the past. That's why you're receiving lunch right now. Okay, and then it's over, right? Versus, you know, you're dedicating for full awakening. You're receiving a lunch that's supporting your practice, that you're going to use to benefit others. And that's very, very different. Yeah. So here... yeah, we're dedicating the merit so that all these little drops that we accumulate in our practice one at a time don't get lost, and our long-term motivation continues to be nourished, which, as we heard, gives meaning to our life and keeps us going, life after life. Okay, that's all I have for this practice. We have a couple of minutes if people have any comments, questions. Clyde?
Is there a connection between the offering and the 7-limb prayer and the Mandala offering? I'm getting the impression that during the Mandala offering, it's offering everything good and bad, in a way.
I would say the Mandala offering is kind of a more extensive version of that movement of making offerings. Right? I mean, already with you're already doing the clouds of Samanta Bhadra offerings for the 2nd limb, right? Yeah, but here, I think it's the idea of offering up the whole universe. Yeah, the core of your identity, basically. Everything you hang on to, it's like the last of it. We are going to give this up. Why? Because I want to clear this all out and receive teachings to transform my mind. Yeah, I think it's a stronger emphasis. More?
That 2nd limb is not only an antidote to stinginess, but it is an antidote to attachment. So it's and you can put it into that whatever you wish, but because attachment's such a strong thing, you start working on the people you cling to, the animals you cling to, and things like that as an antidote to that particular kind of attachment. The aversion, the ugly body or whatever, that can be if you wish, but it's more specifically about stinginess and attachment.
Just the phrase "give up" can have a connotation that is a little much. I mean, just be willing to give.
Give. Okay.
Just be willing to give. And keep giving and giving and giving. And someday giving up will come naturally. But the give part is what's important. Yeah.
And even the word sharing is also, I've seen in this text as well. It's sharing
Yeah.
But you think you do make a good point about, I mean, for me, the Mandala 2 has a lot more about equanimity after that. Objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. It's just so much to work with there. That's not just marvelous things I'm giving up. It's like, yeah, I'm clinging to this foe. It's so weird. Like when you're angry, you think you're averse to that person or whatever, but they are like part of your identity in some weird way. You know, you're like defining yourself against them. It's like, why am I so obsessed with this person or thing? Just in a negative way. What's going on there? It becomes like a very interesting part of practice. So Dania had something, then we'll come to Venerable Lamsel.
Oh, it was a different question.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Then we'll move this way.
With the mandala, the word just letting go comes to mind. So I mean, it's a bit of a different flavor than giving up, but just that like releasing the grip, which offerings has a different flavor to me.
For me, the other thing that For me, the other thing I think about with mandala, especially, is that it's another method, a skillful means that the Buddha taught to help me increase the capacity of my mind, to increase the vastness. So, if the goal is to become Buddha, then I use my mind to grow it in a way like the Buddha did. And so these practices that seem kind of, fantastic or something, I wrap my brain around it and I start doing it, and it transforms my mind, and I can hold more and I can do more because I've increased the capacity.
Dania had something. My question is. Oh, wait, we have to give her a microphone.
My question is, in the Buddhist worldview, the karmic cultivation and thusly the karmic comeuppance, is that considered is it in this lifetime? Is it for the next rebirth, or is it both? How is that viewed?
They'll say it depends on the strength of the action you have done, right? And the object you're doing it in relation to. But mostly I would say it's often you're creating actions in this life that will ripen in future ones. You don't know when. Right? And what always throws me for a loop is the idea that this life is the ripening result of all kinds of actions from the past. I didn't choose to be born human in this form in Singapore. I didn't choose my parents. It's like that's the result of past actions, right? That's the thinking that created this ripening result of being human, of being born in a particular family, of the kind of life I had as a child or things that happened. And that's continuing to ripen as this life unfolds, right? It's like, I got in a car accident. I created the causes for that in the past, right? I mean, of course, all kinds of conditions come together. And there is the possibility of, shifting those conditions, but I must have created the cause to experience the result. It just puts a very different idea of life for me. Yeah, I'm in charge, I if I do X, Y is gonna happen. But how many times have we experienced, in this life, right? You got all your ducks in a row. You're supposed to get this outcome and it doesn't happen. It's like, what else is going on here? Maybe I didn't create the causes in the past, right? So that's one way to think about it. And then to know the actions that we're creating now will have a profound impact in the future. Yeah. So what is that saying? It's like, if you want to know what karma you've created in the past, look at your body now. If you want to know what karma you're creating for the future, look at your mind. That's one saying, one way to work with this. Yeah. I think it's a very powerful antidote for jealousy, though. Sometimes you're like, how come so-and-so, they didn't study and they did so well and I studied my butt off and I did poorly. Okay, they created the cause, whereas I did not. Or that's one factor in it. And to know if I create the causes, I will experience the results. Sorry, Terry had something.
A little bit to do with interrelation, though, like how we are connected to everybody else.
Doesn't what have to do karma?
The causes and conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about how with anything that happens, there's a substantial cause, which could have been a very powerful action in the past, but there are also the conditions that surround that. And so there are all these conditions in this life, situations we put ourselves in, right? Whether you choose to drive while drunk, that could be the condition for some very powerful negative karma to ripen, right? And then there are some people who drive while drunk and somehow do not get into an accident, So yeah, like that. So many complex things interrelating, yeah. Yes, Venerable Seppo.
Maybe you're planning a little wrap-up like this, but I just want to say that we have been putting out the whole smorgasbord this week, and maybe you just wanted a cup of tea, so I think it's just good to know that we can start where we are and we can add little bits when we feel ready. We don't have to jump in and do all that you've heard this weekend all at once. Otherwise, that could be overwhelming. I know for me, the first couple of years that I worked with the abbreviated recitations or the Buddha practice, I just read it straight. I didn't add anything. Did any of you have that experience too? And then slowly, over time, you hear more teachings, and then you think, oh yeah, I can expand that a little bit. That has more meaning for me now, and so now it's richer. But we don't have to start at the end. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, so with that, that's a good spot to end and dedicate. So let's take a moment just to bring ourselves inward. And really rejoice in everything we've done this weekend to engage with these teachings. You might bring to mind one thing that you heard that you will bring forward. And we can visualize all the virtue, the positive potential that we've generated this weekend as brilliant light in our heart that we are sending out into the world, especially to beings that are overwhelmed by the afflictions or in places where they don't have access to teachings like this. May they create the causes to someday experience what we're experiencing. So with that, we'll recite the dedication of merit. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West, flourish.
Okay, so we do have a closing meditation at probably we'll start at 11:10. And before that, Mary Grace has a message for all of us here in our online audience.
Just sit right here in the middle. I have the great honor to talk about and invite Dana. So Dana is it's a Pali word, and it means generosity, and it's actually one of the foundations of our practice, and it's actually in all practices and all traditions, and it's just a way for us to open up our heart and to loosen the grasp of attachment, and it really kind of paves the way for our wisdom and our compassion. And I was thinking, like, what a weekend to be together, because it's been the end for Christians. It's the end of Holy Week. Today is Easter. It's also the time of Passover. So more than half of the world right now has been engaged in really deep practices. And we are engaged in very deep practices. So there's so many folks that are coming together right now realizing that our world needs our prayers, and the world needs peace, and the world needs guidance during these times. We have the great fortune, I have the great fortune, all of us do, to be here at this place at this time, and it's not by accident that we're here. And one of the practices that we do as part of our practice of Buddhists is the practice of dana, which is, I mean, Venerable Damcho just gave this great talk about it on the mandala. So just remembering a lot of what was just given, but it's able to give freely and joyfully with an open heart and an open mind. So everything here at Sravasti Abbey, everything has been given freely. This microphone, all the technology, the food that we all share has been given. It's donated to the Abbey. They eat when food comes to the Abbey. From the lights to these incredible buildings, to the toilet paper, to everything that you're seeing where you've stayed, everything has been given freely and has been the generous donations of folks like us, the lay folks who benefit from these teachings and from being able to be in the presence of folks who are holding true ethical conduct. It's very few places where this is happening in the world right now. So it's really cool to be, and I can feel it. I don't know, I'm hoping that you all have felt that too. So dana is an invitation for you to give freely in whatever way that you can. And this is our physical mandala offering. So we can give our money, we can give time, we can give our resources, we can give anything that we can. And to make a donation to Sravasti Abbey, you can do it online. You can also make out a check to Sravasti Abbey. And when you write your, $100,000 check or whatever you would like to do, I'm sure, or $5, $10, the thing is to give joyfully, to really give freely, and to give from your heart. And I know that it is, again, a really powerful time. I feel this, to be here right now in this time when so much is going on in our world, when the whole world right now is really trying to grapple with what's happening on this planet. So I invite you to join me as I give and open my heart and loosen my grasp and feel that we need deep, deep peace in this world right now. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll come back in half an hour, 10 past 11, for the